You lost, sweetheart? That's the pilot's seat. The colonel chuckled, arms crossed. She said nothing, just stepped in, buckled the 5-point harness, and began the checklist. He kept smirking until the storm alert lit red on the tower screen. 45 minutes later, no one in the control room was laughing. They all stood silent, listening to her voice. Juliet 5, wheels down. Safe and smooth. Main character, Lieutenant Aaron Blake, 29 years old. Pilot transferred from engineering to tactical flight command training. Small build, short hair, solid frame. Always underestimated for looking young and lightweight. First day at Fort Dagger Base, she registered to perform emergency simulation on real equipment. When stepping into the Black Hawk cockpit simulator, Colonel Greg Stern, head of command pilot training, smiled mockingly. Wrong room. This is for pilots, not fuel assistant staff. Erin didn't react. She double-checked wind data and flight conditions ahead. A group of young officers stood outside observing, drinking coffee while waiting for her to fail. The simulation, land a Black Hawk in level 4 crosswinds, visibility under 30 meters. Conditions many pilots would refuse to fly. What Colonel Stern didn't understand was the depth of experience he was dismissing. Erin had spent 3 years in military engineering before transferring to pilot training. She understood aircraft systems better than most career pilots. Her small build wasn't weakness. It was efficiency. Less weight meant better fuel economy and more precise control in adverse conditions. Her quiet demeanor wasn't uncertainty. It was focus learned from engineering work where small mistakes could kill people. The young officers drinking coffee had never seen combat flight conditions. They evaluated pilot competence based on appearance and confidence, not skill. Erin had learned to ignore superficial judgments. Her engineering background had taught her that results mattered more than perception. But she also understood something the observers didn't. Simulation wasn't just about passing tests. It was about developing skills that could save lives in real emergencies. Every practice session was preparation for moments when failure meant people died. The crosswind landing simulation had been designed to challenge experienced pilots. It required understanding of aerodynamics, weather patterns, and aircraft limitations that went beyond basic flight training. Most pilots approached it as a test to pass. Erin approached it as a skill to master. The difference in mindset would become apparent as soon as she touched the controls. While others focused on impressing observers, she focused on perfecting technique that could be applied when lives depended on precision. The mockery she endured was about to be answered by performance that would silence every doubter in the room. Because Erin understood something that Colonel Stern was about to learn. Competence didn't announce itself with loud voices or aggressive posturing. It demonstrated itself through flawless execution when execution mattered most. CTA Asset 1. Comment, they underestimated her if you've seen quiet strength mistaken for weakness. Starting simulation, Erin chose not to use autopilot navigation, switched everything to manual mode. She didn't let anyone see her screen, just focused on the control stick and wind sound feedback. A control tower technician whispered, "She's using emergency wind counterflight technique that was applied in Helmand." During simulation, the commanding lieutenant sitting beside said quietly, "You know this test has caused 3 major level pilots to fail due to axis deviation, right?" Erin replied softly, "I don't fly to compare scores. I fly to not crash." At exactly minute 11, she began controlling altitude descent. The simulator shook slightly from simulated crosswinds. She didn't change expression, didn't break radio contact, didn't turn off HUD, just used shoulder muscles, precise foot pressure. 2 minutes later, the simulator touched ground, not deviating more than 2 degrees. Everyone in the simulation room stopped talking. Colonel Stern wasn't laughing anymore. The transformation was immediate and undeniable. What had started as entertainment for the observers became a masterclass in precision flying. Erin's technique was unlike anything they had witnessed in standard training. Her approach to crosswind management showed understanding that exceeded textbook knowledge. She had compensated for wind patterns before they fully developed, had adjusted for aircraft response lag that most pilots didn't even know existed. The manual control she had insisted on wasn't bravado. It was recognition that automated systems couldn't handle the variables she was managing. Every movement had been calculated, precise, purposeful. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no second guessing. Colonel Stern found himself studying her technique with growing respect. This wasn't luck or natural talent. This was skill developed through rigorous practice and deep understanding. The other officers stopped their casual conversation and began paying serious attention to what they were witnessing. "Sir," one technician said quietly, "her approach angle and throttle management are textbook perfect for these conditions." "Better than textbook," another replied. "She's improvising techniques that aren't in any manual." Aaron remained focused throughout the praise, treating the successful landing as expected outcome rather than exceptional achievement. But her calm confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the assurance of someone who had prepared thoroughly for exactly these conditions. The simulation that had been designed to challenge experienced pilots had been handled by Aaron like routine training exercise, not because it was easy, but because she had approached it with professional competence that exceeded the expectations of everyone watching. Colonel Stern realized he had made a significant error in judgment. The young and lightweight pilot he had dismissed was actually operating at a skill level that surpassed most of his experienced staff. The room that had been filled with skeptical laughter now carried the quiet respect reserved for demonstrated excellence. But the real test was about to begin, because while simulation tested skill, reality tested everything else: judgment, courage, and the ability to perform under pressure when lives actually depended on the outcome. And that test was coming sooner than anyone expected. CTA Act 2. Comment: silence equals respect if you've seen silence as a sign of real change. Right as the test ended, emergency alarms rang out. Field training team was stranded at LZ Delta Point. Weather turned stormy, level 5 winds, visibility under 15 meters. No duty pilots were ready to take off. Colonel Stern looked at the screen, about to announce cancel everything. Aaron spoke up. "I know the coordinates. I've flown that simulation point 3 times. Just give me Juliet 5. If I don't return in 50 minutes, call search and rescue." The entire room went dead silent. Nobody dared authorize it. But she was already in the real cockpit of Juliet 5, performing quick checks and taking off before anyone could react. She flew into the white radar blind zone, lost contact for 11 minutes. A technician whispered, "If she can land this, I'm changing careers to window cleaning." Radio reconnected. "This is Juliet 5. Visual acquired. LZ'd in sight, ready to descend." When the aircraft reappeared on radar, the entire control tower stood up. Everyone watched the position screen. Hearts seemingly stopped. And then, Black Hawk Juliet 5 landed in swirling winds, exactly on target position, without a single shake. The first soldier stepped out and was carried to safety, alive. The emergency that had paralyzed experienced pilots had been resolved by the person they had been mocking an hour earlier. Colonel Stern watched the radar track with disbelief. Aaron had flown a route that required navigating by instruments alone through weather conditions that grounded commercial aviation. "Control, this is Juliet 5, her voice came through clearly. 4 personnel recovered, all stable, returning to base." The control tower erupted in controlled chaos. Everyone wanted confirmation of what they had just witnessed. How did she find the LZ in zero visibility? How did she land in those wind conditions? How did she navigate without GPS reference? The flight path analysis showed something remarkable. Aaron had used terrain following and dead reckoning to navigate through conditions where electronic navigation failed. She had applied engineering knowledge of weather patterns to predict wind behavior that meteorology couldn't forecast accurately. Most importantly, she had made a command decision to launch when more experienced pilots had declared the mission impossible. Colonel Stern realized he wasn't just watching exceptional piloting. He was witnessing leadership under pressure that exceeded his own experience. When Juliet 5 touched down at Fort Dagger, medical teams rushed to treat the rescued personnel. All 4 soldiers were alive because someone had been willing to fly when flying seemed impossible. Aaron completed post-flight procedures with the same methodical precision she had shown in simulation. No celebration, no boasting, just professional attention to aircraft maintenance. "Ma'am," a young pilot approached hesitantly, "how did you know you could make that flight?" Aaron looked up from her checklist. I didn't know, but they needed extraction, and I had the skills to try. That's what we train for. The simplicity of her answer highlighted everything the observers had missed about her character. She hadn't been showing off or trying to prove anything. She had been applying skills when those skills were needed to save lives. The laughter and mockery seemed trivial now compared to the reality of what she had accomplished. Colonel Stern approached with visible humility. "Lieutenant Blake, I owe you an apology and our gratitude." "No apology necessary, sir. Just maybe evaluate pilots by their capabilities rather than their appearance." The emergency rescue had transformed more than just the status of 4 stranded soldiers. It had changed how everyone at Fort Dagger understood competence, courage, and the difference between looking like a leader and actually being one. CTA Act 3. Comment, she just landed dignity if one moment changed how you see a person forever. When returning, Erin didn't enter the auditorium. She personally wiped rotor blades covered with frost, checked oil levels. A young trainee approached, stood at attention, then said quietly, "Ma'am, first time I've seen people go silent out of respect." She smiled lightly. If they're alive, then silence is worth it. That evening, a video from the simulation camera was shared. Erin landing, hands shaking from pressure but not deviating, eyes never leaving the target. Under the video were 3 words: pilot, not just a seat. The next day, the Pilot of the Month board was updated. Lieutenant Erin Blake, Juliet 5, precision plus nerve below that. Someone taped a handwritten note. The colonel laughed. The tower stood. The impact of Erin's rescue mission extended far beyond Fort Dagger. Word spread through military aviation networks about the simulation that became real-world heroism. But Erin remained focused on practical concerns: training, aircraft maintenance, and preparing for the next emergency that might require exceptional skill. Her approach to recognition was consistent with her approach to flying. No unnecessary drama, just professional competence applied when competence mattered. The young pilots who had been drinking coffee and waiting for her to fail now requested transfer to her training program. They had learned that real aviation skill wasn't about confidence or appearance. It was about performance under conditions where failure had consequences. Colonel Stern recommended Erin for advanced command training and formal recognition for her rescue mission. But she declined the publicity aspects. "I prefer training other pilots to handling media attention." Her influence on Fort Dagger's training program was immediate and lasting. Simulation exercises became more realistic, focusing on practical skills rather than test performance. The story of her emergency rescue became required study for all pilot candidates. Not as inspiration, but as example of how engineering knowledge and aviation skill could combine to achieve seemingly impossible results. Years later, when military aviation instructors taught courses on decision-making under pressure, they used Erin's emergency flight as a case study. Not because she had been reckless, but because she had demonstrated perfect judgment about when rules could be safely broken to save lives. Her legacy became not just the 4 soldiers she rescued, but the pilots she inspired to approach their training with greater seriousness and dedication. Because she had proven that competence transcended appearance, and that the most important flights were often the ones that nobody planned for. The quiet professionalism she brought to aviation raised standards for everyone who served alongside her. CTA Act 4. Comment, I'll let her fly anytime. If you believe real skill doesn't need debate, just needs to land right on time. Erin Blake didn't talk much. She didn't explain when laughed at. She just flew and landed exactly where needed when nobody else dared take off. This story is for anyone who's been underestimated because of appearance, voice, or gender. Because real skill doesn't lie in others' opinions, it lies in your hands. When you hold the controls in real storms, and sometimes the best story is when the entire control tower says nothing at all. The most powerful lesson from Erin's story is about competence over confidence. In fields where performance matters more than perception, results eventually speak louder than assumptions. Erin's quiet professionalism had been mistaken for uncertainty by people who confused loudness with leadership. But when emergency demanded action, her preparation and skill proved more valuable than anyone's opinions about her suitability. Her story reminds us that expertise often comes in packages that don't announce themselves. The most qualified person in the room might be the one everyone overlooks, because true capability doesn't need validation from others. It just needs the opportunity to perform when performance saves lives. And sometimes the person who looks least like a hero is exactly the hero the situation requires. Aaron proved that competence transcends expectations, and that the most important recognition comes not from applause, but from successful missions that bring people home safely.